Bible prophecy is active and unfolding daily. Zechariah 12, Isaiah 17, Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38. Here is what the LameStream Media is not telling you. Shalom, my friends. Welcome to this week's newscast. Maybe the busiest newscast I've yet to do. Things are really ramping up. So I want to try and move along quickly here for you so this doesn't take that long. From the JewishPress.com, there was a huge oil discovery on the Golan Heights, 10 times larger than any find ever recorded. If the oil can be extracted at a reasonable cost, and that's a big if right now, it would make Israel totally self-sufficient. Syrian rebels, ISIS, and the Assad regime, and today that means Russia as well, now have another reason to capture the Golan Heights: oil. Drilling that began more than a year ago has exposed a huge find of billions of barrels of oil. That's billions of barrels. But it's too early to know if the black gold can be extracted at a price that would make the oil commercially viable. If oil can be extracted, it will be a huge bonanza for Israel and an enormous reason for whoever rules in Syria or for Hezbollah, that is fighting with Assad's forces and is based in Lebanon, to launch a war on Israel. Could this very well be the spoils they attack Israel for, as we see mentioned in the Gog-Magog war of Ezekiel 38:12. From the New York Times, Russia said that its volunteer ground forces would join the fight in Syria. The plan for so-called volunteers was disclosed on Monday, October 5th, by President Putin's top military liaison to Parliament, who said his country's volunteers on the way to Syria, quote, cannot be stopped, close quote. American military officials said more than 600 Russian military personnel were already on the ground in Syria, not counting air crews, and that tents for nearly 2,000 people have been seen at Russia's airbase near Latakia. Turning to wars and rumors of wars, Tuesday, October 6th, from the Jerusalem Post, the Israeli Defense Ministry announced the completion of sensor-based electronic security fences surrounding 12 Israeli communities near the border with Gaza. The smart fence will form a physical obstacle if there is an attempted infiltration into a community. It will send a warning to a regional council control room and to the IDF every time the fence detects contact. Further, the IDF has deployed a new high-tech underground tunnel detection system in the south, while the Army's combat intelligence collection units look not only at enemy activities in Gaza, but also back into Israel to ensure that they can detect and respond to cross-border infiltrations quickly. They rely on high-rise radar masts and electro-optical sensors. Mobile field intelligence units also quietly move around the region, scanning for infiltrators. Also from the Jerusalem Post, newly revealed documents show that the Palestinian Authority pays tens of millions of shekels every month to terrorists in Israeli jails. Most of those receiving PA salaries are Hamas members who were behind some of the bloodiest terror attacks of the Second Intifada. These payments clearly show that the PA provides economic incentives for carrying out terrorist attacks. Moreover, the PA payments help bolster the image of the terrorists as heroes. Those who sit in jail for longer periods get more money, meaning that the more gruesome the terrorism, the more money will be paid. On Wednesday, October 7th, from Reuters, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei banned any further negotiations between Iran and the U.S. His statements, however, directly contradict those of Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. Khamenei said, quote, "We are in a critical situation now as the enemies are trying to change the mentality of our officials and our people on the revolution and our national interests," close quote. Then from the Washington Post, Russia's Caspian Sea Fleet launched 26 cruise missiles against Syrian rebels from nearly 1,000 miles away, backing a Syrian government offensive while Russian planes continued to carry out airstrikes. These strikes are a wake-up call for Iran, showing that Russia now has proven long-range land attack systems that can reach anywhere in Iran or the Persian Gulf. And from the Washington Times, U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter said that the U.S.-led coalition has not agreed to cooperate with Russia in the fight against ISIS, and no collaboration is possible as long as Moscow continues to strike other targets. The Russians continue to hit targets that are not ISIS targets. From Haaretz, an Israeli man was stabbed in the chest by a Palestinian outside a shopping mall in Petah Tikva in central Israel. The attacker, 25-year-old Tamer Yunus Ahmed Veridat from the West Bank, arrived at the mall by bus and immediately started attacking passers-by. Then, 24-year-old Amjad Al-Gandhi, a Palestinian from the West Bank, stabbed an IDF soldier and stole his weapon in the southern Israeli city of Kiryat Gat on Wednesday before being shot dead by police. A Jewish man was stabbed in the back by a Palestinian woman in Jerusalem's Old City on Wednesday, near the site where the two Jewish men were stabbed to death by a Palestinian 4 days earlier. The wounded man then shot his assailant. From the Jerusalem Post, a Palestinian terrorist with a stolen rifle burst into the apartment of Liat Ohana in Kiryat Gat on Wednesday and tried to stab her with a knife stolen from her kitchen. Ohana and her mother rushed out of the apartment with the attacker in close pursuit. Ohana later told Channel 2 News, quote, "We just kept running. I looked death in the eye and thought I'm not going to make it out alive," close quote. Then a Palestinian vehicle tried to break through the Zaim security checkpoint near Ma'ali Adumim, east of Jerusalem, in an attempt to run over security forces. IDF soldiers at the scene apprehended the driver. From the Times of Israel, 18-year-old Shorok Dwayat wrote in a Facebook post, quote, "I'm going to become a shaheed," that's a martyr, close quote, shortly before stabbing an Israeli man in a terror attack. And from Ynet News, 38-year-old Rivi Lev Ohayan was injured south of Jerusalem after Palestinian attackers smashed her windows with rocks and attempted to physically remove her from the vehicle. Quote, "I managed to miraculously escape a lynching attempt," she said. "I noticed a line of about 10 people forming a human barrier. They were all holding rocks, and there were another 10, 20-something-year-olds behind them. 10 of them jumped on my car and broke my windshield, while one of them opened my door. I saw my death. He started kicking me, but I managed to lock the door and drive away. 7 Israeli cars were damaged in the attack." Then on Thursday, October 8th, from the Times of Israel, an Israeli man was seriously wounded by a Palestinian in a stabbing attack in Jerusalem at a light rail stop near the Israel Police's national headquarters. The victim was evacuated to the hospital with the knife still lodged in his neck. The attacker was caught by police. From the Jerusalem Post, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas returned to Ramallah on Friday after speaking at the UN, and shortly before his arrival, several Fatah gunmen appeared in the center of Ramallah and opened fire into the air, chanting slogans in support of the PA president. This was the first time in 7 years that gunmen belonging to the Aqsa Martyrs Brigades had made such an appearance in Ramallah. And in Dahish, near Bethlehem, Fatah and Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine gunmen marched in the streets to celebrate the attack which killed Etam and Naama Henkin, mentioned last week's newscast. Also, an IDF soldier was stabbed in Afula by a 20-year-old Tarak Yahya of Jenin in the West Bank. The terrorist was captured. From Haaretz, 19-year-old Ta'ir Abu Ghazala from an East Jerusalem neighborhood stabbed 4 people in Tel Aviv near the Azrieli Mall. The assailant stabbed a female soldier with a screwdriver, then stabbed a 60-year-old woman and a man and woman in their 40s, each one in the chest. An Israel Defense Forces soldier chased after him and shot him. Further, a Palestinian stabbed an Israeli man in Kiryat Arba in the West Bank and then escaped. Last week, I reported the Palestinian attack that killed Etam and Naama Henkin, I just mentioned moments ago, the murder of 2 parents in front of their 4 small children. Senior figures in President Abbas's Fatah faction actually praised that murder of unarmed civilians as an act of heroism. And by the way, the Henkins' 4 small children were unharmed because, by the hand of Yahweh, the bullets of the Palestinians missed hitting the children, and instead the Palestinians wound up shooting each other. This kind of miracle will be seen happening in the Gog-Magog war. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 21 reads, "I will call for a sword against Gog throughout all my mountains, says Yahweh Elohim. Every invading soldier's sword will be against his ally in panic and confusion." We also see this kind of miracle in 1 Samuel chapter 14, verse 20, which reads, "Then Saul and all the people who were with him rallied and went into the battle, and behold, every man's sword," referring to the Philistines, today that would read every Palestinian's sword, "was against his companion in wild confusion." The PA is currently pursuing a blatant escalation of its rhetoric, which comes on top of the violence on the ground, from an increase in the number of large demonstrations to shooting and rock-throwing ambushes on the highways. On Friday, October 9th, from Ynet News, a Palestinian terrorist stabbed a police officer in Kiryat Arba. The attacker was shot. Also, a 15-year-old Israeli was stabbed in Jerusalem. The attacker was neutralized by security forces at the scene. Then, from Haaretz, 3 Palestinian construction workers and 1 Bedouin municipal worker were stabbed Friday morning in Dimona by a Jewish attacker. And a Jewish resident of the town was arrested on suspicion of involvement in the incident. From the Washington Post, ISIS captured villages in Aleppo as part of a surprise offensive against rival insurgents on Friday in its most significant gains in Syria in months. The progress made by Islamic State fighters comes at the expense of rebel groups opposed to Assad and the jihadists. Those groups, which the U.S. has viewed as the most palpable allies in Syria's civil war, are now confronting both ISIS and Russian firepower. From the Jerusalem Post, 7 Gaza rioters were shot dead while seeking to enter Israel. Soldiers first called out warnings and fired warning shots to try and stop the rioters from advancing to the border before finally firing at them. Then on Saturday, October 10th, senior Hezbollah commander Hassan Hossein al-Hajj was killed during heavy fighting in Idlib in northern Syria. From the Jerusalem Post, on Saturday night, dozens of Palestinian rioters from Gaza damaged the security fence and infiltrated into Israel, where they were immediately surrounded by security personnel. And a 19-year-old Palestinian stabbed 2 Israeli border police officers at the Damascus Gate. The attacker was killed. Further, a Palestinian terrorist stabbed 2 Jewish men in their 60s near the Damascus Gate in Jerusalem's Old City. Then on Sunday, October 11th, Iran tested a new precision-guided ballistic missile in defiance of a UN ban. Big surprise there, right? Iraqi security forces bombed the convoy of ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in an airstrike near the country's border with Syria. Al-Baghdadi's fate remains unknown. From Ynet News, 4 Israelis, including 2 soldiers, were attacked on Sunday evening at the bus stop of a shopping center. The assailant, an Israeli Arab, was captured by security forces. He used his car to run over 2 soldiers waiting at the bus stop, then got out and stabbed a 19-year-old female soldier and 2 others. The 19-year-old female soldier is in critical condition. A Palestinian driver activated an explosive device at a checkpoint near Ma'ale Adumim on the West Bank on Sunday, wounding a police officer who pulled her over. The terrorist, 31 years old, from East Jerusalem, was severely wounded. And on Monday, October 12th, from Ynet News, a Palestinian terrorist walked up to a border policeman near Lions Gate in Jerusalem's Old City on Monday morning and tried to stab him. Security forces killed the terrorist. To recap the news, there was an oil discovery on the Golan Heights 10 times larger than any find ever recorded. Could this be the spoils spoken of concerning the Gog-Magog war of Ezekiel 38:12? More than 600 Russian military personnel are now on the ground in Syria, not counting air crews, and tents for nearly 2,000 people have been set up at Russia's airbase near Latakia. Israel Defense Ministry announced the completion of sensor-based electronic security fences surrounding 12 Israeli communities near the border with Gaza. The IDF has deployed a new high-tech underground tunnel detection system in the south. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, banned any further negotiations between Iran and the U.S. Russia's Caspian Sea Fleet launched 26 cruise missiles against Syrian rebels from nearly 1,000 miles away, backing a Syrian government offensive while Russian planes continued to carry out airstrikes. So, Russia now has proven long-range land attack systems that can reach anywhere in Iran or the Persian Gulf. Iraqi security forces bombed the convoy of ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in an airstrike near the country's border with Syria. ISIS captured villages in Aleppo as part of a surprise offensive. Senior Hezbollah commander Hassan Hossein al-Hajj was killed during heavy fighting in Idlib. Iran tested a new precision-guided ballistic missile in defiance of a UN ban. An Israeli man was stabbed in the chest by a Palestinian outside a shopping mall. A Jewish man was stabbed in the back by a Palestinian woman in Jerusalem's Old City. A Palestinian terrorist with a stolen rifle burst into the apartment of Liat Ohana and tried to stab her with a knife stolen from her kitchen. A 18-year-old wrote in a Facebook post, "I'm going to become a shaheed, a martyr," shortly before stabbing an Israeli man in a terror attack. 38-year-old Rivi Lev Ohayon was injured south of Jerusalem after Palestinian attackers smashed her windows with rocks and attempted to physically remove her from the vehicle, miraculously escaping a lynching. An Israeli man was seriously wounded by a Palestinian in a stabbing attack in Jerusalem. An IDF soldier was stabbed by a 20-year-old Palestinian. A 19-year-old from an East Jerusalem neighborhood stabbed 4 people in Tel Aviv. A Palestinian stabbed an Israeli man in Kiryat Arba on the West Bank and then escaped. Have you ever heard me ramble on with so many details? A Palestinian terrorist stabbed a police officer in Kiryat Arba. A 15-year-old Israeli was stabbed in Jerusalem. 3 Palestinian construction workers and 1 Bedouin municipal worker were stabbed by a Jewish attacker. A Palestinian terrorist walked up to a border policeman near Lions Gate in Jerusalem's Old City and tried to stab him. 4 Israelis, including 2 soldiers, were attacked on Sunday evening at the bus stop of a shopping center. Again, have you ever heard me ramble on like this? A Palestinian driver activated an explosive device at a checkpoint. Dozens of Palestinian rioters from Gaza damaged the security fence and infiltrated into Israel. Palestinian terrorists fired a rocket from Gaza at Ashkelon. A 19-year-old Palestinian stabbed 2 Israeli border police officers at the Damascus Gate. And a Palestinian terrorist stabbed 2 Jewish men in their 60s near the Damascus Gate. And that, my friends, is what the LameStream Media is not telling you. Abba willing, I'll see you here again next week. Until then, stay safe. Shalom.
Crowded rooms, I need more space than I consume. Enough is time alone with you, underneath the naked moon, sharing confidential moods and making chatter. Mockingbird nocturnal sings notations of eternal things, entering the quantum breeze, flying not for want of wings. He lights his gaze on you and me, simply because we matter.